Grab your notebooks. You don't want to miss the inside info to betting MLB team win totals for 2024.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the 2024 MLB Season Preview. Sponsored by FanDuel.
The 2024 MLB season is upon us, and Locked On has the answers to the biggest questions for the season. Over this 5-episode series, you'll hear from every local host we have covering every MLB team in a way only Locked On can provide. I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste, and in this episode, we'll look at the FanDuel over-under win totals for every team in all of baseball. We'll start with the AL West, a division that didn't see a team crack 100 wins last season, but did see the Oakland A's only get 50. So where will each team land this season?
Right here, we've got Bryce Patrick from Locked On Rangers, Tyden Gonzalez from Locked On Mariners, John Frisch from Locked On Angels, and Eric Heisman from Locked On Astros. And guys, we got your over-under numbers from FanDuel, and the Astros actually lead the way. So Eric, we're going to start with you. I'm going to give you guys the numbers, and then you guys tell me, especially for your team, if you feel like FanDuel hit it on the nose. Astros, over under 93.5 wins. Rangers 88.5. Mariners 86.5. Angels 72.5. Did FanDuel get it right, Eric?
I think that's pretty much where we're sitting. I believe they got 92 wins last year. So 93.5, that sounds about right. If you're looking at the Astros, their offense should be better. You're not going to be playing Martin Maldonado every day. You're going to be playing Yainer Diaz. The offense should be better. I think that Alex Bregman has had one of his most productive off seasons, and he's looking to get a huge contract. So you're going to have a lot of people out there, and you have not only do you have the starting pitchers that are here now, but you have Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers coming back around the All-Star break. So the Astros have what it takes to get those wins, and they're going to be playing a lot of good teams in the AL West. And the good thing about that is there's more of a spread out schedule now. So it's not just playing the good teams in the AL West. You're going to be playing more teams across baseball. So that could be good and bad, but I think that that's probably, I would take the over maybe just 94, but I think that's a pretty good call.
And Bryce, you know, the Astros and Rangers, of course, all knotted up at 90 last year, but FanDuel says Astros landed 93.5, Rangers landed 88.5, Mariners 86.5, and Angels 72.5. But particularly for Astros and Rangers, did they get it right?
I think so. I think during the regular season, the Astros might have the Rangers beat out in the long haul, but again, Rangers wouldn't mind being the underdogs in the playoffs. They won, all of their road games in the playoffs last year, something that's never, ever happened in the history of baseball. 88.5 wins seems about right. Again, there's a lot of variance for this club, and a lot of it depends on those pitchers that are on the IL. I mean, is Max Scherzer going to come back and be the Max Scherzer that the Rangers saw in the regular season? That was a very, very effective version of him. He's coming back in June. Can the rest of the starting rotation, hold up well enough to, get to that second half of who knows what Jacob deGrom is going to look like when he comes back? I imagine he's going to look pretty good. And who knows what Tyler Mahle is going to look like whenever he comes in at July or whenever it ends up being. But I think this team can definitely win over 88.5 wins. I'd say 90 wins, which is what they did last year. I think that's definitely feasible. I think they could get a little bit better with the offensive pieces they're adding in those young rookies and Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford. I think this offense is just going to continue to get better. It was even a down offensive year for Nathaniel Lowe, who was a Silver Slugger the year before, and last year just was not the same version of himself at the plate, even though he was hitting in the 3-hole for most of the full season. But I think this team can definitely continue to hit its way out of its woes. I think it's going to be able to do that even more this year, no matter what the starting rotation looks like. And this rotation that's not cracked up to be all that great, it's basically the same exact starting rotation that they had the first half of last year while this team was running away with the AL West lead before coming back down to earth in the back half. But I think I go over on that 88.5 wins, but I think there's a really good total because I am feeling just barely on that over for the regular season win total.
Indeed. So, Ty, last year you saw the Mariners win 88, but FanDuel has the over-under for the Mariners at 86.5. Of course, we said Astros 93.5, Rangers 88.5, Angels 72.5. But for your Mariners, 86.5. Sound about right?
I think that's a lot closer to their floor than their ceiling. And I don't really see how they're worse in any way from the end of the season or opening day last year. They still won 88 games in spite of, guys like Julio and Ty France underperforming, at times severely underperforming, an incomplete roster overall. And, just a disappointing year in general, right? Injuries, stuff like that also occurred over the course of the year. Robbie Ray gets hurt in the second game of the year. That really derailed things for their starting rotation. So despite all of those things happening, they still pushed 90 games. They still were in prime position entering the month of September to win the division. I would absolutely hammer the over, because this team is deeper offensively. Again, there's a lot of injury risk here, but there isn't really a ton of performance risk. The only guy that they're asking out of the 13 position players that they're supposed to roster, the only guy that they're asking to be something that he really hasn't been recently is Dom Canzone. And outside of that, guys like Luis Urias, who they've added towards more of the back end of the roster, he's recently been a 2-win player. Guys like Mitch Garver have been, one of the more underrated power hitters in all of baseball pretty consistently. It's just, again, can these guys stay on the field? That's the big question mark here. But this pitching staff is the great equalizer. This rotation is 5 deep. It has 3 guys who have legitimate Cy Young potential. I'd be stunned if they didn't finish in the top 10 in Cy Young voting, all 3 of them. And Bryce Miller might be another guy that pushes that top 10 as well, especially if that splitter that he's been working on this offseason is a real pitch. So, and then on top of that, they have a legit bullpen that does have some question marks right now because of the health of Matt Brash. We don't know if he's going to be able to start the season on the roster or not. With his elbow injury, and we don't know how long that could potentially last into the season. There's been a lot of conflicting reports on that, but even so, Andres Munoz, Gregory Santos, Gabe Spire, and they have a lot of solid mid-leverage options as well in that bullpen. I know I said earlier that, you can't win games 0 to -1, but this team has a better shot than I think really any team in the league to win a lot of 2-1 ball games. And that might be enough, because that they've done that in years past. I forget exactly which year it was, but they won 1 billion 1-run games, and that ultimately carried them into playoff contention. So maybe it's another year like that. But I do think that this offense, if it stays healthy, is going to be able to hit enough in combination with that pitching staff. And I think they can win a hell of a lot of ball games. And I wouldn't be surprised if we look up in October and they've won 93 games.
Fair. Now, John, FanDuel has essentially kept the Angels right where they were, 73 wins last year, over under 72.5 wins. And of course, Astros 93.5, Rangers 88.5, Mariners 86.5. But your Angels over under 72.5. Did they get it right?
I think that the Angels can go over 72.5. And you might call me crazy because we just lost a 10-WAR player in Shohei Ohtani, who single-handedly led the Angels to wins most of the time. But here's what I think about that. I can't express it enough how important Ron Washington and the coaching staff is to this team. Ron Washington's never had a team win less than 75 wins. He's always had a team 75 or above as a manager. And so I think, like I mentioned before, just getting his hands into the clay that is this young core of good players. I mean, look, we've seen Patrick Sandoval pitch a 2.91 ERA in 2022. We've seen Reed Detmers throw a no-hitter at the age of 22. And so there's just so much talent there that's like yet to be unlocked. And again, I don't want to disparage anybody, but the coaching staff that this team has had over the last 5 years in terms of the pitching coach and bullpen coach, hitting coach, all that stuff, it really has done nothing for them. And as we've already witnessed as Angel fans in spring training, and my brother and I paying attention super close to what's going on with these guys, they're doing a lot of things right. And we often call it boring fundamental baseball. And we say boring, facetiously, but that's really what it comes down to for these Angels. It's, making the plays that you're supposed to make. It's going first to third on a pass ball when you have the opportunity to do so. I mean, I think I watched Anthony Rendon go first to third the other day. And if anybody can get Rendon to get on his horse like that, it's Ron Washington, right? And so I think there's a lot of question marks around this team, but in terms of who's in charge of this team and how they can get the best out of this team, I think that they can get above that 72.5. Honestly, I think if they break even at 81-81, then that's a win for them. That's a step in the right direction for this franchise.
Indeed. Can't wait to see how it goes down in the AL West. I think we're going to have some that are obvious in terms of the competition, but sounds to me like there are going to be some surprises coming out of the AL West as well. So if you want to know more and you kind of want to watch this day by day and see how these teams make their way up and down as they race to potentially postseason opportunities for many of them, and maybe even another shot at a World Series, make sure you check out your favorite Locked On MLB show, Your Team Every Day.
In the NL West, the Los Angeles Dodgers have huge expectations with a FanDuel over-under of 103.5. Will Shohei Ohtani lead them to the over? How will the rest of the NL West measure up to FanDuel's expectations?
Since everybody has agreed that the Dodgers are going to win the division, let's start with the over-under from FanDuel on the Dodgers, and then I'll give you the over-unders on the other teams. And we're going to do this rapid-fire style, so give me your thoughts on whether you think it's an over or an under on each team, starting with the Dodgers. 103.5 for them, D-backs 83.5, Padres 81.5, Giants 81.5, and Rockies 59.5 wins on the season. You agree?
Dodgers over, D-backs over, Padres under, Giants over, Rockies over.
I knew he couldn't wait to say that. You can tell.
Just because the Padres are going to be bad. That's the only reason I think that.
So with that in mind, Javier, you know I have to come to you so that you can give a little bit of a defense for the team you cover, if you so choose. Over under 81.5 for the Padres in terms of wins. Dodgers over under 103.5, D-backs 83.5, Giants 81.5, Rockets 59.5. Where you falling?
So first of all, Rockies I got over because I just think that that's way, way too low, and I'll always bet on not being historically bad. Like, that's not that high of a bar to clear, and because of every reason that Paul has talked about. He does a great job with that, with how many players were hurt, the Nolan Jones phenomena, right? Like, all of that stuff I think will be better. I'm going to save my thoughts on Giants and D-backs. I can't decide, but with Dodgers, I'm going over. They won like 105 games or whatever last year.
They only won 100 last year.
Yeah, so like, I'm pretty sure they can clear that hurdle. So I think that, and I'm going over on the Padres. And aside from the bias, I've mentioned this a lot on all of our segments we've done on this beautiful show we've assembled together. I'm a believer in law of averages. Last year, Padres historically bad in the clutch. And I think that in baseball and sports in general, I think that you see that a regression to the mean when you are so bad in game scenarios like that is expected. Let's say for football fans out there, Minnesota Vikings last year, they were like 9-0 in one score games, plummeted the next year. The Padres, they were like, it got to the point where they lost so many extra inning games that I was rooting for them to lose another one to break the record of going 0-14 in extra innings. I'm not kidding. That's how dark it got last year. So I think if they have the extra innings and their run score games, if they're just medium, I think they clear 81 fairly easily. Don't know if they'll make the playoffs. That's another thing, but I think they will be better than last year for that.
So now do you got a quick counter?
Yeah. Can I just make a quick point? When we did our segment about who's going to win the division, Javi took the Dodgers struggling in the clutch for 3 games against the Padres in 2022 as a symptom of the Dodgers being chokers in the postseason, but the Padres being terrible in the clutch for 162 games last year is something that's going to average out. Anyway, that's all. That's all I wanted to say.
I was just saying, for someone who takes as many shots at the Padres, the last time it was a full, not short.
For sure, going to average out.
You know what I mean?
Year, so they have to.
You know what I mean?
All right, move on to somebody else.
And then not to mention. And then not to mention, there's other teams that have beaten them. Go talk to the Angels. Harry Kendrick, I believe, is retired, but I'm sure
Harry Kendrick was on the Nationals when they beat the Dodgers.
Nationals, whatever. They're both in red. What do you want from me? What do you want from me?
I'm going to talk to Millard right now about the Diamondbacks, because they were the team that you could definitely call an overachiever, if you will. So let's go with their over under 83.5 wins this season. Dodgers 103.5. Padres 81.5, Giants 81.5 wins, and Rockies 59.5 wins. But do you think, based on where they were last year, that this number is accurate for the D-backs, Millard?
I love our sponsor at FanDuel, but honestly, kind of disrespectful for a team that just went to the World Series and improved on all the holes that they just had to put it at a lower win total than what they had last season. Kind of disrespectful, FanDuel. I'm smashing the over. That's free money for all my D-backs fans out there. I'll take the over for the Dodgers as well because they are a regular season team. I will take the over on the Padres because I think healthy Tatis, bounce back Machado, and hopefully my guy Bogey has the bounce back as well. I think they have enough offensive pieces and, maybe a little bit left in the tank for you, Darvish. They could get to 82 and 80. The Giants, I'm sorry, Ben, they're going to be closer maybe to the Rockies than we realize. I got the under on the Giants. I mean, Robbie Ray might not come back to August. I mean, who else is in that rotation? We don't know. And then for the Colorado Rockies, I mean, 59.5. Again, disrespectful, Paul. I'm taking the over on the Colorado Rockies. They should at least, they should win 61 games. They should get to 60 at least. Come on.
All right, Ben. It seems like there was a little disrespect coming from Millard on that over-under. So let's talk about it. The Giants have an over-under of 81.5. Rockies, 59.5. D-backs, 83.5. Dodgers, 103.5. Padres, 81.5. Let's go ahead and defend your guys. For the Giants, come on.
I mean, it's tough because the last 2 years I've expected them to beat their kind of modest over-unders, and they've been 81 wins and then 79 wins. So those are two disappointing years, like Jeff said, coming off 107 wins in 2021. They have spent committed the second most amount of money to free agents this offseason. So Millard's point that the Rockies and the Giants are close is insane. And I mean, the over-under FanDuel, betting markets have a clue about what they're talking about. And these teams, again, are separated by more than 20 wins here in the over-under. And so to say that they're similar is insane to me. But I got to say, I'm taking the under on the Dodgers. 103, that's 104 wins, right, is what you're saying. And like, as good as they are, it's not easy to just roll out of bed and win 104 games. The Dodgers do it somewhat regularly, but you got some injury prone players. You've got you could win. They won 100 last year, and I think that they had won 100, and I know they did take some steps back, but I mean, that it's kind of like what we're saying with Paul. Like, it's just such a high number versus such a low number, that I'm more tempted to take the under on a huge number like 103.5. And with the Rockies, I'll do the same. I think they won 59 last year. And so to put it at 59.5 with everything Paul said, I think is a totally fair argument. And then it gets tougher with the teams in the middle. I think the Padres are actually an easy over for me, even though they did lose Juan Soto, etc. Like Javi's point with extra innings and all that stuff is totally fluky, one-run games. You don't go like 1-13 in extra inning games. Like, you're just not going to replicate that. And they still have a lot of talent on that team. Like, even if they win like 83, 84 games, I'm still taking the over on 81.5. It's tough call on the Giants, and I would also take the over on the D-backs. I don't think they're going to win 96. They honestly could, but I do think, they won 84 last year, and I do think they improved. And so I would take the over on them too.
And
Giants are a tough call there.
Yeah, and understandably so, to the point that you made about the last couple of seasons. And, Paul, you look at that number, 59.5. I mean, that is pretty historically low, for lack of a better term, as an over-under. And then you look at the D-backs, 83.5 wins, Dodgers 103.5, Padres 81.5, and Giants 81.5. What are your thoughts on the over-under, but particularly that over-under for the Rockies?
Well, I'll start with the Rockies. Hammer that over. I don't think that this team is as bad as last year. I don't think that they're a 100-loss team. I don't think that I wish I could feel as confident about as Millard that they would be better than the Giants. But they are a better team across the board, and if their pitching just is fine, they will be okay. The Rockies have not lost 100 games in their history up until last year. Last year was the first time that had happened, and there's been some bad Rockies teams that I would argue that are worse than this Rockies team coming out. The Rockies did, who knows if Cal Quantrill ends up being like decent, the Rockies, that's going to be a better option than Chris Flexen and Chase Anderson was last year. And the Rockies do have some young, in parentheses, arms. It kind of depends on how you look at it. Age-wise, not so much. But honestly, I'm going to take the homer here. I'm going to take the over on every single team in the NL West. The NL West is the best division in baseball, and every single one of these teams got better. It's if you need the weird thing for the Giants, it's an even year. So why we will never bet against the Giants in an even year. And every single team, like all of these teams got better. I think the most impressive one out of all of them. Actually, I mean, the Dodgers is one thing, but I think the Diamondbacks have sneakily had the best, one of the best off seasons and one of the best trade deadlines. I'm in Mariners country right now, and I saw Paul Sewald, and I think adding in Paul Sewald and now going and getting another guy that vibes with Paul Sewald and Gino Suarez there to play third, the Diamondbacks are going to be even more fun, and that is awesome. Yeah. I like I said, I think that this is a division that is, I mean, the Rockies would be looking good if they were in the central divisions of either of the AL or the NL. I mean, this is a loaded division. So I think all of these lines, you can take the over. I will say I am hesitant with the Dodgers just because I'm with Ben. That's a big number. Somebody can get hurt. Random thing could happen in the middle of the season. I mean, they're going to win 100 games, but there might be a weird thing where it's 102. So that one, maybe I would take the under, but I would be confident in taking the over for every single team in the NL West.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. This could be arguably, it's the most competitive and arguably the best division in all of Major League Baseball. For more around the NL West, be sure to check out your favorite Locked On MLB show, Your Team Every Day.
Coming up, the Atlanta Braves are another team with 100-win expectations. How many wins for the NL East? Get ready to say farewell to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's gonna win it all. And while you're locking in your college hoops picks, check out the MLB odds. It's not a surprise that the Dodgers have the best odds to win it all at plus 320. The Atlanta Braves aren't far behind at plus 450, followed by the Houston Astros at plus 700. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. The Atlanta Braves have a FanDuel over-under win total of 101.5. How do our NL East hosts see this division shaking out top to bottom?
Guys, we wrap with the over-under totals that FanDuel has given us for this season. I'm going to throw these 5 out at you guys, and then I'm going to ask each one of you to kind of chime in and let me know if you think that it's accurate. Give me your over-under. Let me know what your thoughts are. So Braves, they give the over-under 101.5. Marlins over-under 78.5. Phillies over-under 89.5. Mets over-under 81.5. And Nationals over-under 66.5. Finkelstein, your thoughts?
I told you before they're a 500 team and the over-under 81.5. So yeah, it's right. It's right where I would expect it to be. Of course, I'm going to take the over as the Mets guy, but I think the odds have it right there. It could really go either way. But if they're able to string together a rotation of Kodai Senga's not out for the first half of the season, if it's just the first month, I do think they can hit that over, but it absolutely can go either way.
And Clary, I'll start with the Nats over under 66.5. Then we'll go back to Braves 101.5, Marlins 78.5, Phils 89.5, Mets 81.5. Accurate for you?
Yeah, I think the Nationals go over by just a tad there. Like, I don't think they're going to be winning 75 games this year. I could see maybe 70 wins, 71, kind of similar to what we did last year. But you still do have Dylan Cruz coming up this year. You have James Wood as well. Those are 2 of the top outfielding prospects in all of baseball. This rotation should be a little bit better. You got a lot of young guys like C.J. Abrams hopefully taking a step up this year. But listen, I mean, this is going to be just one last year to hopefully kind of tank, get a shot at the lottery here, going into next year, trying to get a top prospect yet again, like a Dylan Cruz, like your Cade Cavallis from years past, Brady House, all these different guys who are going to be making an impact with the Nats. So you could see some of these younger guys at some point this season. But yeah, I'm going to take the over at 66.5. I'm not going to say anything crazy like winning 80 games, but I could see 70, 72 wins this season, and that'll be pretty decent, I think, for us.
And Connor, your Phils over under 89.5, Braves 101.5, Marlins 78.5, Mets 81.5, Nats 66.5. They get it right? FanDuel?
Listen, I think all those numbers sound good for all the teams. I think it sounds pretty good for the Phillies. 90 wins last year, 87 the year before. As good as they've been in the postseason, they've somewhat underachieved based on the talent level on this roster in the regular season. So if they can win over 90 games, they'll be a postseason team again, no problem. And I would take the over, considering they won 90 last year with Trey Turner not playing well, Bryce Harper's injury, a couple of pitchers not performing their best, including Aaron Nola. But that's right around where I'd expect the Phillies win total to be, and we'll see how it plays out.
Indeed. Peter for the Marlins, 78.5, Braves 101.5, Phils 89.5, Mets 81.5, and Nationals 66.5. Before your Phillies, are they on point?
Listen, if I was a betting guy, which I am, a betting guy, what I'd say is I absolutely love that number for the Marlins to go over for sure. I love that for sure. As well, I'm going under on that Bravos number. I'm also going over on the Nats number. Phillies is close, and I'm going under on the Mets too. So, like, the bookies normally get it right. FanDuel are probably on it, but I'm a betting guy. I'm willing to roll the dice here. I like the Marlins' chances to be over 500 for sure. I think the Bravos take a little bit of a step back and maybe change the way they manage their roster in the season rather than all the big guys out every day. But it's a close division for sure. Feels like the Bravos are the favorites, but I like the Marlins as well, naturally. But I like the Marlins to bounce back. They haven't gone backwards. What's that? 6 games? They've got them 6 games reduced from last season. They were the 5 seed in the NL, the Marlins. Come on, FanDuel.
Yeah, and I know I said Phils, but that's exactly why I asked you that question that way, Peter, about the Marlins, because I felt like with the Marlins, the number was a little bit low. So that's why I wanted to ask you, did you think that was a bit accurate? I think we've got Clary, we got you. Finkelstein, we got you. Thomas, we got you. Pratt, we got you. So we're going to round it up and wrap it up with Lindsey Crosby. And I'm going to give you these numbers one more time. Coming out of the gates with the Braves, 101.5. Marlins, 78.5. Phils, 89.5. Mets, 81.5. And Nats, 66.5. They get it right for the Bravos. They get it right for the rest of the division.
I think for the Braves, it's probably going to be a little bit over, just simply looking at the fact that, one, they did everything they did with all those injuries in the rotation, and two, Atlanta really figured out a lineup configuration that worked a little bit later with Matt Olson going to cleanup. So, barring catastrophic injury, I like them to be a little bit higher. I am going to push back on Peter a little bit. I think the Marlins are going to underproduce, because one of the big things for Miami last year was almost an unsustainable record in close games. And from a run scoring perspective, they didn't have they actually had a losing run differential. They had less runs scored than runs allowed. And so to me, I could see them backing up a little bit, especially when you take out Jorge Soler and his power. I like the Nationals to go over, like Ryan said, some prospects coming up. Projection systems never quite get those guys right. And for the Mets, I'm a little worried about how long Senga's going to be out, and outside of that, you have a lot of questions about your rotation. Can these guys bounce back or not? And I just don't know if you'll hit on everybody for that. For the Phillies, it's all based on injury. That's probably right in line if everybody's healthy, but I just worry that somebody's going to slump, somebody's going to get hurt, or like Connor talked about, your outfield defense is just going to struggle significantly and you're going to have some holes. So I like the Braves over. I like the Nationals over. I like everybody else to be a little bit under.
Well, spring training is here, so we're actually able to get our eyes on some of these prospects. We're actually able to get our eyes on some of these MVP candidates and even our X factors. And if you guys want to hear more about what's going on in spring training leading up to opening day, make sure you go around the NL East to any of these great podcasts. Check out your favorite Locked On MLB show, Your Team Every Day.
The AL East has a wide-ranging number for each of their teams' win totals, according to FanDuel. But how do our hosts see their seasons shaking out?
It is time to put the money where the mouths are. If we really feel passionate about how good or not so good our teams are, starting with the Rays. So the Rays over-under from FanDuel came in at 85.5. And Kevin, what I'm going to do is give you all the over-unders. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on the Rays at 84.5, but chime in on those other over-unders as well. Going with the Orioles, having the highest over-under at 89.5 wins. Red Sox, 79.5. Yankees, 94.5. And Blue Jays, 87.5 wins. But starting with your Rays, did FanDuel get it right at 84.5 as the over-under?
No, I think that's way too low. And I think that happens every year where some of these betting sites and projection models just underrate the Rays because they don't have that top-heavy talent, those impact players that we've talked about on this program here today. But What matters is the Rays' depth, versatility, how they utilize the players, how they put them in the best position to succeed, how they do everything that they do with openers and substitutions and platoons and giving guys rest days.
Yeah.
And over 162, I think that matters is very important. Now, when we get to the playoffs, that's a different conversation, because I think having those impact star-laden players that can shine under the big lights is very important. But from April to October, I think the Rays have so much depth offensively, defensively, and pitching wise that I would be really, quite frankly, shocked if they don't win at least 90 games. Not saying they're going to win 99 or 100, but getting around that 90 to 92 benchmark, I think would be really good for them and continue to outshine expectations like they have the previous couple years, even though they are dealing with injuries, even though they are dealing with trading some impact players and some star players like Wander Franco, who is presently not with the team. But I think that they'll continue to prove people wrong this year.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Kevin, I was a little bit shocked there as well, because to your point, yeah, there are some variables that you mentioned that may not be 99 from last year, but it does seem like a 15 game drop off is a little bit dramatic as well. So I couldn't agree with you more. I was kind of shocked by those numbers. And when we look at the numbers, Braden, for the Blue Jays, the over under was 87.5, the Orioles 89.5, Red Sox 79.5, Yanks 94.5, and Rays, of course, 84.5. But do you feel that FanDuel got it right, starting with your Blue Jays at 87.5?
I mean, it's close. You look at the last year's statistics at 89 wins. It is right around there. But again, we've gone over this on our show and even on here as well, saying that Blue Jays team wasn't at its best. We had problems scoring runs. This year, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem with some of the bounce backs that these guys are going to have or looking like they're going to have. So I'm going to take the over on that one. But I will say it's in the ballpark of fair.
Yeah. And what about the other over-unders? Were there any that kind of stood out to you that was a little off-putting based on where those teams were last year, or where some of the offseason moves they made this year, like the Orioles with 89.5, and we know they won 101 games last year, for crying out loud. Red Sox 79.5, Yankees 94.5, and Rays 84.5. Any of those numbers kind of make you go, okay.
Yeah, the Rays drop off and the Orioles drop off, honestly, is crazy to me. But at the end of the day, there is only so many wins to go around. But I do think these numbers are low. I could easily see 3 teams having 90 plus wins this season. So it's tough to look at. There's only so many wins, but at the end of the day, this division is stacked pretty heavily. So I think we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and Connor, I would say the same. Again, I think when I looked at the numbers initially, the one that was the head scratcher for me, in addition to the Rays, of course, but the Orioles number was probably the head scratcher for me, because I thought, okay, over under at 89.5, this team had over 100 wins last year. That's an interesting place to land. But then, like I said, you've got the Rays at 84.5, Blue Jays at 87.5, Red Sox at 79.5, and Yanks at 94.5. So where did FanDuel get it right, and where did they maybe make you scratch your head as well?
Yeah, I don't think 89.5 is a terrible number. I'd take the over on the Orioles only because it feels unlikely they'll take a 12 or more win dip. But it is hard to go up from 101 wins. Like, not a lot of baseball teams at this point can consecutively win 100 plus games. So I do think the Orioles are going to win less games than they did last year, just because there was a solid amount of luck involved. Also, they were probably more of a low 90s true talent win team that won 101 games. I think they'll fall back a little bit. Honestly, the loss of Felix Bautista for the Orioles probably takes away some of those wins, because they had the best closer in baseball, and now they have Craig Kimbrell. And this is not, 2013 Craig Kimbrell. This is 2024 Craig Kimbrell. So that's going to look a little different at the end of games. In terms of the rest of the division, I kind of agree with Kevin. Like, it's not only the over-unders, but it's a lot of projection systems as well. Just don't do a great job of evaluating depth. And I think the Orioles are building a similar depth on the hitting side, not necessarily yet on the pitching side with what the Rays have. But if the Rays lose an impact reliever, they have 12 dudes in AAA who can pretty easily replace that guy. And a projection system can't really see that. So I do think the Rays, they were neck and neck with a 101 win Orioles team, and they turned Zach Littell and Drew Rasmussen and Jeffrey Springs into these incredible pitchers after getting them off the scrap heap. They will do it again. I think the Rays are a little too low. And I honestly think the Yankees and the Red Sox are both just a tad high, but I'll just leave it at that.
I'll leave that right there. And you're right too. It is, those are some of the things like who comes up from your farm system and is able to either achieve or overachieve if they're called into action early. Yeah, that's something that a projection system is probably going to have a challenge kind of evaluating. So Gabby, with your Red Sox, 79.5 wins is where FanDuel landed them looking. That's kind of where they were last year with 78 wins. Orioles, 89.5, Yanks, 94.5, Rays, 84.5, and Blue Jays, 87.5. Do you feel like FanDuel got it right?
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with Connor on my Red Sox. The 79.5, I am taking the over on that, but not by much. I think they're going to be around a 500 team this year. They won 78 games last year and had one of the worst defenses in baseball. Last year, their defense will be a lot better this year with Trevor Story hopefully being healthy, and just him coming back and playing shortstop last year just made the infield defense look a lot more competent. They also, traded Chris Sale this offseason for a second baseman who has a ton of potential. I'm looking forward to seeing him and how he fits into the Red Sox lineup, plus just the development of some of the younger guys. I think guys like Tristan Casas is going to have a big year this year. Jaron Duran had a great season last year. I'm expecting him to have a big season again this year as well. Tyler O'Neill, if he can stay healthy, I think was a good addition to the Red Sox this year that isn't being talked about enough because, again, he's injury prone. But if he can stay healthy, his defense is going to be great for the Red Sox outfield. So I think there are a lot of young players who have talent to improve a little bit from last year. So I'm putting them at about 81 wins. I think they're going to be about a 500 team. I think 79.5 is a pretty good, number range for where they should be, but I'm definitely putting the over by a little bit. I think in terms of the other numbers, I do think the Orioles will surpass theirs by a lot. I think they win no less than 90 games. I think, again, they're be a really good team again. I picked them to win the division. I think they, might not win 100 games, but they'll definitely win a lot more than what their number is projected to be. The Yankees I thought was interesting. I think, theirs I would take the under on, but not by a lot either. I think they have a good chance to win 90 games too, but their pitching staff, to me, especially their rotation, is a question mark. I think they have some things that they need to prove from a pitching standpoint still before I can confidently say they'll win 95 or more games. So I'm actually taking the under on that one a little bit. But the other ones I think are pretty around where they should be.
The inside bar, Gabby, of course, we appreciate everything that Chris Sale was able to do with Red Sox, and hopefully that deal will work out for the Red Sox side as well. But the Braves country is absolutely excited about what he's able to do. But you're right, when there are shifts like that, it's always interesting to see kind of how it plays out with what works with the team overall. And Stacey, for you with the Yankees, of course, the over-under was 94.5. And of course, they had 82 wins last year. Then you look at the Orioles over-under 89.5 wins. Red Sox 79.5, Rays 84.5, Blue Jays 87.5. But let's start with your Yanks at 94.5. Did FanDuel get it right on the over-under?
I think it's close. I've had 92 in my head if everything goes right, and even if things don't go quite right and then they trade for a starter at the trade deadline, maybe something will happen. But I feel like 94.5 is a bit much. I mean, that is a big jump. But a lot of things went wrong in order for them to only win 82 games in 2023. So I feel like hovering around 91, 92 makes more sense. The other numbers, the Rays are too low. I feel like the Blue Jays are too low. I feel like the Orioles are too low. I feel like with the expanded schedule now where we don't play, the teams in division don't play each other as much. Mm-hmm. If the AL East keeps beating up on everyone else, you could have 3 90-team wins in the division. Or 90 win teams in the division. So that wouldn't be a shocking thing to me. And I agree with Gabby. I feel like the Red Sox, like I said, sure, they'll be last, but I feel like they'll be hovering around 500 as opposed to being in the 70s.
Yeah, and I pretty much second what Stacey said there. I wouldn't be surprised if 4 teams in the division win 90 plus games and then the Red Sox finish under 500. I'm sorry, Gabby.
Gabby, your call.
It is what it is. I mean, I do really feel like they will be behind everybody else, and it might not be that close. I think everyone else is more on the tier of, potentially competing for playoff spots. And then there's us that are just hanging out at the bottom. But I do appreciate what Stacey said about them being around a 500 team, because I do feel like they can be that this year. And I just am excited for the growth of some of these young players on the team who ideally will be a big part of the future for them moving forward.
Well, anytime things are as heated up as they could be in the AL East, I feel like that's always a good look for Major League Baseball. For more around the AL East and how things play out and whether or not these over-unders from FanDuel are accurate, be sure to, throughout the season, check out your favorite Locked On MLB show, Your Team, every day.
Coming up, the Cincinnati Reds and the Chicago Cubs look to keep pace with what the Milwaukee Brewers did in 2023. How many wins will it take, and can they get there? Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. This includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channel lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, traveling, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. The Milwaukee Brewers led the NL Central in 2023, but the division top to bottom was closer than any other in Major League Baseball. So can the Cubs or Reds make a push towards the top? And where will every team land with their win totals?
Chuck Freeman of Locked On Brewers, Stephen Offenbaker of Locked On Reds, JD Hafford of Locked On Cardinals, Ethan Smith of Locked On Pirates, and of course, Sam Ober of Locked On Cubs. So Chuck, now it's time for the fun part, the over under. You guys know where your teams landed last year, and you know where your opponent's teams landed last year as well. Want to talk about where you think they're going to land this year, especially looking at some of the offseason moves they did or maybe didn't make. So let's start with you, Chuck. I'm going to give you guys the over-unders from our friends over at FanDuel, and you tell me if you think they're accurate for those teams. And guess what, Chuck? We start right with the Brewers. Over-under 77.5 wins. Cubs, 83.5. Reds, 80.5. Pirates, 75.5. Cardinals, 85.5. Did FanDuel get it right?
I think so. I did, and especially with the Brewers. And if the Brewers do finish in last place in the division, I want to be checking in with Ethan to find out how I keep this podcast interesting daily on a last place baseball team, because that's going to be odd. But
I can help you too.
I'll need some help. But you know what? We've been the Brewers have not won a World Series ever, so we're used to losing, I guess, kind of here in Wisconsin. But I think the Brewers going under the 76 or 77.5. I think you said I can see that happening. I do see them finishing in fourth place and finishing under the total. And that sounds like FanDuel got it right. Brewer total seems to be dipping. At one point, it was 80.5. So I think as the offseason continues to go on, we're moving down and down on that list. But that's about right. I'd go on the other than that one.
Interesting. And then, Stephen, when you look at where the Reds landed, it's an over-under of 80.5. And then, like Chuck said, Brewers 77.5, Cubs 83.5, Pirates 75.5, Cardinals 85.5. They get it right?
No, the off-season setting of these things has been pretty wonky. Jeff and I have spent a lot of time on Locked On Reds talking about the off-season predictions and how we don't really like them. As far as the Reds goes, this team won 82 games last season and got better. Setting the over-under 80.5 is a give me as far as I'm concerned. I am all in on the over as far as the Reds at 80.5. The Brewers at 77.5, it's getting closer. to being right. Chuck's right. It did start higher than that and has since adjusted. I think at 77, I would still be willing to take the under because I do truly believe they're going to blow this team up somewhere along the way. Cubs at 83, that seems about right to me. I would have to really spend some time thinking about that one, where I would go on an over-under at 83 for the Cubs. Cardinals at 85, I will take the under all day long. These guys are going to break down and wear out before the end of the season. This is a team that's going to be going from last place, and some of these offseason projections have them going from last to first. Again, there is 0% chance of that happening. I just don't see it. I would go all in on an under at 85. And then the Pirates at 75, I think I would take the over on that. I think they're going to be a little bit better than that. I don't know that they'll break into a winning season, but I think they've got more in them than 75. For all of the reasons Ethan has been talking about this offseason, for the decisions the Pirates have made. So I would take the over there. I think that's how I would do my over-unders for the offseason totals as they are right now.
Got it. And JD, let's go with the Cardinals. We're looking at an over-under of 85.5, Pirates 75.5, Reds 80.5, Cubs 83.5, Brewers 77.5. Starting with your Cardinals at 85.5. Did FanDuel get it right?
Oh, man. I feel like the Cardinals, if healthy, 86 wins is attainable. But, man, there are a lot of questions because they had to bring in 10 new pitchers this offseason. 10. And bullpen-wise, it's a lot of new arms with a lot of high ceiling, but you don't know enough about these guys. And do I know if Lance Lynn's going to be anything this year? Like, it's really tough. I got to be honest. I mean, I want to go with my heart and say, yeah, sure. But I cannot tell you with a straight face that the Cardinals are going to win 85 games this year. I just think there's way too many question marks with all of the new things they brought in. And for the reasons that other guys have mentioned, that, some of these guys are getting older, Goldie, Arenado, Wilson Contreras. Will he do what he did in the second half last year where he was one of the top 5 hitters in the league? And nobody knows that, but he was. Will some of their youth be able to jump up and be better this year and make enough of a leap that it makes that big of a difference for some of these older guys who are coming down the hill a little bit? So for the Cardinals, I'm going to say under 85.5.
Fair enough. And so, Ethan, let's talk about these Pirates. So you're looking at the over-under number for them by FanDuel, 75.5, Brewers 77.5, Cubs 83.5, Reds 80.5, and Cardinals 85.5. But with your Pirates 75.5, did they get it right?
I think it's hard to say that they didn't, and it's hard to say that they did, because they won 76 games last year, and you can't really look at this team and say it's any worse than it was last season. So I think it's easy to go over there. And I know that Jeff, by the way, is not on this with us, but he did bet the Pirates over last year. So I'm telling him to do it again so he can make some more money. But really what I wanted to bring up with these over-unders overall is, if you notice, folks, the over-under between the last team, the Pirates, and the first team, the Cardinals, is 10 games. This is a division that could literally see the last place team win 76 to 78 games and the first place team win 84 to 85 games. So have fun with these over-unders, folks. I do think the Pirates hit the over. I think the Cubs probably hit the over, the Cardinals hit the under, the Brewers hit the under, and the Reds hit the over. So that should give you an idea of where I think the division sits, but also how close this division has the potential to be going into September.
And Sam, that's a great point, because you kind of look at the top of those over-unders, and there are the Cardinals rather at 85.5, and then the Cubs right there at 83.5, and then Reds 80.5, Brewers 77.5, and Pirates 75.5. So yeah, quite competitive. But do you feel like those numbers are fairly accurate?
I've already bet the Pirates over. I think they're going to go over. I think the Reds are going to go over. The Brewers, I like I said, I think they're my pick to finish last, but that's getting really low. That's probably a stay away for me. And I think the Cubs are going to go over. I feel pretty strongly about that. And the Cardinals, a lot of talk, about the Cardinals and the old guys. I'm always going to be a little fearful of the Cardinals. It's just kind of in my blood. So I 85.5, I think that's a really good number. I think they're going to be right around there. And I think
I think it's a little disrespect to our division. I know we don't have the talent like the Dodgers and over at West or the NL East, but there's a lot of competitive teams. Like Ethan was just saying, I don't think there's really any really bad teams in this division, and I think it's gonna be a fun summer, and there's gonna be a lot of different combinations of what potentially could happen. So
yeah, and I think that's a great call because it's going to be competitive, and when you see the teams bunched up like this with the over under, it really makes you think, wow, you could very much so get down to the last week of the regular season before you know who walks away with the NL Central crown. So if you guys want to follow the drama that I think is going to go on throughout this entire season with the NL Central, you got to make sure that you check out your favorite Locked On MLB show to know about your team every single day.
Finishing our FanDuel over-unders is the AL Central, who didn't see any teams get over 90 wins in 2023. Will that change for this upcoming season?
Jack Johnson, host of Locked On Royals, Scott Bentley, host of Locked On Tigers, Brandon Warren, host of Locked On Twins, and Justin Latta, host of Locked On Guardians. And Brandon, I'll start with you talking about the buying or selling because that might also dictate the over-under. So I'm going to give you guys all the over-unders. Definitely weigh in on the over-under for your team. But if you have thoughts about whether or not the over-under is on point for our other teams, definitely jump in and say so. So Brandon, starting with you, these are the over-under totals that our friends at FanDuel dropped. With the Twins, it's 87.5 wins, Tigers 79.5, Guardians 78.5, White Sox 63.5, Royals 73.5. Brandon, did they get it right?
Wow, those are all really, really tough lines. I think the Twins will go over just because I think they won that many games last year with, again, not that much production from their three Musketeers, who should be their absolute studs. It's two guys drafted number 1 overall and then someone drafted number 2 overall. I mean, these are what you want when you use those picks, or in the case of Correa, sign them. So I'm taking the over there. I think everybody else, like, I was surprised KC would be right about where I said, 73.5. And the one that I struggle with, I think the most, is probably Cleveland, because I think they'll be over. But again, there's going to be so much jostling, as everyone has kind of, indicated, to the point where a lot of these are murky, like at best. I'm taking the Twins over, but as we've said on Locked On Twins, both of us, Dave and I, are very, very bullish on this team and their depth. So I got the Twins over. Everybody else I'm curious to see how everyone else feels.
Yeah, and Scott, when you look at where this group or where FanDuel rather landed, and I'll be interested to see where the group lands as well for the Tigers, they give the over-under of 79.5. And of course, we mentioned the Twins, 87.5, Guardians, 78.5, White Sox, the over-under is 63.5, and FanDuel gives the Royals over-under at 73.5. Do you think they got it right?
Yeah, I do. I really think that all of these are right about in the ballpark for what I was expecting each of these teams to kind of be near. For the Tigers, I've been saying for a while, like, oh yeah, right around 80, maybe a little bit more wins. And of course, then it's 79.5. So I guess I'll take the over. Again, obviously the homerism in play there, but like this is a team that was really close to that 79 win mark last season, and their core is all youth. And so you assume, rightfully or wrongfully, you assume that they're going to take maybe another step forward. They added a ton to the rotation. They added some veteran presence to the bat. They're adding a top prospect in all of baseball to the lineup as well. I just think that what the Tigers built last year, with everything they have going for them, there's a lot of volatility, as I've said, but there is a lot of potential for a decent baseball team here. So I think I'm going to go with over for them. The Twins one is like impossible to me. That's like exactly what I expect the Twins to be. I'm going to go, I guess, under on the White Sox, just because if I go under, that means they lose 100 games, and I'm pretty sure they're going to lose 100 games. I think the Royals are really kind of the most fascinating one to me, because they did have such an active offseason and added so much talent in, and they're kind of like the general population's darling for like taking a big step forward type of team. But as we have said throughout this, if they're out of it, if they're in fourth place,
on July 31st, then a lot of their assets are going to walk out the door. Maybe not a lot, but several of their key assets that they picked up either this offseason or last are going to walk out the door and be traded. So I think that they're a really, really fascinating one just because they clearly are better than last year when they were one of the worst teams in baseball. But it's just a matter of whether they are going to be in contention enough to hold on to said players or give themselves a big enough cushion to kind of hit that over, even if they end up selling at the deadline.
And Justin, as Scott was talking about where he thought the over-under was for the Twins and that it was accurate at 87.5, I kind of saw you give the head nod cosign. So I'll swing it over to you. Obviously, I'm thinking that you're thinking that's accurate, but let's talk about where the FanDuel over-under landed for the Guardians at 78.5. And then, of course, for the Tigers, 79.5, White Sox, 63.5, Royals over-under 73.5 wins. Were they accurate with the Guardians? Did they get it right with everyone else?
Yeah, they're close on the Guardians. There's such a wide range of where Cleveland could go. We told everybody on Locked On Guardians last year to take the over, and that failed us. So it wasn't the best advice. I'm still going to take the over this year for the Guardians because I like the pitching staff, and I don't think the offense could be as bad as it was a year ago, especially when you're adding, Kyle Manzardo and Bo Naylor for a full season. It's got to be better. The Twins one is so rough because I would take the over, but only by the skin of the teeth. I don't think any team in this division is capable of winning 90 games. And not that matters because we saw what happened with the NL pennant last year. The Diamondbacks barely got in and they got to the World Series, but I just don't see anybody in this division winning 90. So, I'm taking the over on the Guardians. I'm taking the over on the Twins, but just very barely, just maybe 88 wins. And then I would probably take the under on everybody else. So close on Detroit. Definitely take the under on the White Sox because when they trade Dylan Cease, it's all downhill from there. I know we keep kicking the White Sox because they don't have a representative here, but when they trade Dylan Cease, they're going to have not a lot of pitching to go to there. But yeah, pretty much spot on for the most part. Everybody is right on by the skin of their teeth on these predictions, I think.
So Jack, when we look at where the Royals landed, and Justin was talking about the under there at 73.5, taking the under for them. You've got that under, then you've got over under for the White Sox at 63.5, kind of building up. Guardians at 78.5, Tigers 79.5, and the Twins at 87.5. Where do you think FanDuel got it right? Where do you think maybe you go over under?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a little bit of time around this Royals team already. I was down there in Surprise, had the chance to talk to a few of the players, and I can tell you one thing. I mean, you're always going to have players speak and coaches speak, but this is really a highly motivated group. And a lot of these guys feel like, they are good players. People just don't know it yet. Maikel Garcia, I think, is a very talented third baseman. Not a lot of people know who he is yet. James McArthur's people know who he is yet. John McMillan, another guy in that bullpen. And, even guys like Vinny Pasquantino, he's been hurt in the first 2 years that he's, been in the big league. So he's somebody that is highly confident, feels like he can break out. It's going to be a homer pick here. I would take the over on Kansas City. I'd be really shocked if they bottomed out again, because also, with the people I've talked to around the organization, there's not really this sense of if things go slightly wrong, they're going to trade away everybody they just signed. Like they signed Lugo to a 3-year deal so that he could be there for a few years. Walker to a 2-year deal. Renfroe to a 2-year deal. Some of these bullpen guys have an option. Like, I know to the outside perception for what the Royals have done, it'd be a no-brainer. It's like, oh, if they aren't good, just sell everybody else. I think they went into this offseason of, well, with the lottery system, you could lose 120 games and you may pick fifth. I mean, Cleveland got the number 1 overall pick and the Royals finished, God knows, what was it, 20 games behind him or 15 games behind him? Like, there is no more incentive to lose. They got to replenish the farm system, absolutely. But they've taken on this approach of they're wanting to compete in this division. And it would have to go really south in the first half. The worst team in baseball, in my opinion, for them to start selling off pieces. If they're within, 10 games of first place, they're not going to start chipping away everybody. I think they're going to try to make it, if it's a 2-year plan where they just want to be competitive and then keep these guys and keep building, that's one thing. But from being around this group, there is this sense of a lot of confidence, and they really want to prove themselves. They are a group that knows they're not respected, and they're not going to be respected until they start winning those games. Predictions is one thing. You got to go out there and actually win on the field to get that respect.
And like you said, Jack, sometimes that chip on the shoulder can be all the motivation that you need in order for you to, I'll just put in quotes, overachieve. For more on the AL Central as the 2024 season evolves, check out your favorite Locked On MLB show, Your Team, every day.
Now that we've heard the MVP candidates for every MLB division for 2024, check out the rest of Locked On's MLB season previews, including which players are in the MVP conversation, the division winners, and what were the biggest offseason storylines you may have missed. Don't miss an episode by subscribing to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.